Hi, this is Dr. Bhavin Jankaria, and I have this talk tomorrow, that is Sunday the 4th in the morning, and I'm recording this on Saturday. But my brief is to talk about differentiating IPF from non IPF ILDs for physicians, with the understanding that many physicians who are not pulmonologists can also eventually manage IPF patients after understanding the disease process. And so I try to create, or I have created, a simple flowchart for this. Now, the first thing to understand is that any ILD has to be bilateral and diffuse to begin with. And when we look at diffuse lung diseases, and of course we could include bilateral consolidation, bilateral metastatic disease, etc. But broadly, in practice, the two commonest diffuse lung diseases are the airway bronchiectasis emphysema combination and then the interstitial lung disease set. And 999 times out of 1,000, it is not difficult to differentiate among them. So emphysema, and this is advanced destructive, will have lucencies, cysts without walls, confluent, overinflation, etc. And bronchiectasis would have branching tubular, saccular lucencies going from the hilum to the periphery. And if you have a whole set that you can scroll through, this is one of the easiest diagnoses to make radiologically, plus clinically. The patients who have bronchiectasis have very specific symptom profiles and signs. And so then that brings us to interstitial lung disease. So a patient presents with diffuse lung disease. We rule out other causes such as COPD, bronchiectasis, and other conditions of any form of bilateral lung disease, but that's usually acute, subacute. Then we come to interstitial lung disease. And interstitial lung disease typically has a few signs. Three of these are for the fibrosing ILDs, and I'll come back to them in a minute. And you have these 5 plus cystic ILD forming the non-fibrosing ILD signs. And so that's ground glass, consolidation, septal thickening, ill-defined non-branching centrilobular nodules, and discrete subpleural non-branching perivascular fissural nodules. Now, when we see only these signs, these imply non-fibrosing ILDs, and so they don't come under the ambit of IPF, non-IPF in that setting. The only caveat is that all of these findings can occur within fibrosing ILDs as well, either as part of the fibrosing ILD or as a superimposed complication. But apart from that, today we're not going to be discussing non-fibrosing ILDs because that's not the brief here. What we want to focus upon are the fibrosing ILDs, which are characterized by reticular opacities, traction bronchiectasis, and honeycombing. And these are the 3 signs that I will describe in a little more detail in the next few slides. Now, when we see a fibrosing ILD, the only thought in our mind has to be, is this UIP? Is this a usual interstitial pneumonia pattern, or it's not UIP? That's in a way a binary classification that we need to make. And while mixed patterns are known and are increasingly being described predominantly with connective tissue disease, for all practical purposes, our thought processes and mine when I'm reading scans as well, when I see a fibrosing ILD, is this UIP or not? And the UIP definitions that we will use today are a combination of the new statements that were published earlier this year where the UIP radiologically implies subpleural, usually lower lobe predominance with reticulation, traction bronchiectasis, and honeycombing, first proposed in a codified manner in 2011, with the other understanding that there will be nothing else. So no ground glass, no nodules, etc. And in 2018, another category was added where we said you could have reticular opacities, traction bronchiectasis, no honeycombing, nothing else, and still call it the UIP pattern. So the difference between the two is really the presence or absence of honeycombing. The typical UIP pattern has honeycombing, the probable UIP pattern doesn't. So if you're not even very sure, you could just use the generic term UIP pattern without an adjective in front. Now, the presence of honeycombing is a very specific sign and points us to the likelihood of a UIP pattern. And the definition is cysts with shared walls in the subpleural region, layered one on top of the other. Very rarely you could have a single layer, and this occurs because of destruction of lung parenchyma and loss of architecture. And here we can see classic honeycombing, cysts, shared walls, multiple layers as if extending from the subpleural interstitium towards the hilum. And when we see this, this is classic fibrosing ILD with honeycombing, and the next step really is to figure out whether it is UIP or not. Take this patient. We have subpleural basal predominance, honeycombing, traction bronchiectasis, nothing else. So this is the UIP pattern. Sagittal images help us understand honeycombing better and to be more confident about making the diagnosis of honeycombing, and then in this patient as well, this is a UIP pattern. But because honeycombing is so important, we should be able to differentiate among the various cystic or lucent conditions that can simulate honeycombing. And here is the list. I'll just show you two examples. One is bronchiectasis, which is an easy differential. So there's honeycombing on the left, bronchiectasis on the right, where we'll see branching lucencies extending from the hilum to the periphery, and centrilobular emphysema, where we see cysts without walls next to vessels, and that's how we can differentiate them. The others also, by and large, are easy to distinguish from honeycombing, which is important because honeycombing defines a fibrosing ILD with a lot of specificity. Traction bronchiectasis is dilatation of the bronchial lumen with thickened irregular bronchial walls caused by fibrosis, and so we use the term only in the context of fibrosis. And look at this here. We have reticular opacities, we have traction bronchiectasis, we don't have honeycombing, we have subpleural basal predominance, we have upper lobe non-dependent involvement, and nothing else. This is your classic UIP pattern without honeycombing, or the probable UIP pattern. So now traction bronchiectasis is a very sensitive sign. It is seen in virtually every patient who has a fibrosing ILD. And the only issue is that it's not always, let's put it this way, irreversible. And so we saw this during COVID-19, that patients who we thought were going to have bad fibrosing ILDs recovered. So in the acute context, we should be very wary about saying that traction bronchiectasis equals fibrosis, but in the non-acute context, that's what it means. Now, reticular opacities I kept for last, so I've been using the term constantly. It's because it's a slightly nebulous term. These are linear opacities that typically extend from the subpleural interstitium, forming a net-like lacy appearance. And so they are either, sometimes you may have subpleural sparing, but you will basically see them at the periphery going towards the center. And when we are talking of fibrosing ILDs, this is relevant because it's when you see reticular opacities with traction bronchiectasis or reticular opacities with honeycombing that we know that we're dealing with a fibrosing ILD. Couple more examples. 73-year-old, there's a little bit of pneumomediastinum, honeycombing, traction bronchiectasis, subpleural basal predominance, nothing else. This is the UIP pattern. 59-year-old, reticular opacities, traction bronchiectasis, and I've put in prone images here because the prone images are so much better at making us understand the disease pattern, especially when it is mild disease, like in this patient who didn't have anything in the upper lobes. Simply because the compression of the lung bases that can occur in the supine position, even with end inspiration, goes away in the prone position. And in fact, if you compare August 25 with October 23, you can see that there is minimal to mild progression of disease, which is very important because it tells us this patient has a progressive disease which needs to be treated. So this is the probable UIP pattern. Now, once we've decided that something is UIP, so that's the second step or the third step. The first step is saying, yes, this is interstitial lung disease. The second is saying it's a fibrosing ILD. When we see reticular opacities, traction bronchiectasis, honeycombing, we know it's a fibrosing ILD. And then we define the UIP pattern by saying these are reticular opacities, traction bronchiectasis with or without honeycombing, subpleural basal predominance, and nothing else. The next step is to figure out whether it's primary or secondary. Now, if you have a UIP pattern with an etiology, then that's secondary. So here's a 27-year-old with a UIP pattern, honeycombing, reticular opacity, subpleural basal predominance, nothing else, but there's esophageal dilatation, and the patient is 27 years old. So this is scleroderma ILD with a UIP pattern. 66-year-old, reticular opacities, traction bronchiectasis, no honeycombing, there was nothing else. So this is a probable UIP pattern in a patient who has calcified pleural plaques. This was asbestosis. The patient worked in a brake lining factory. So this is asbestos ILD with a UIP pattern. 45-year-old has traction bronchiectasis, reticular opacities, nothing else. This is a probable UIP pattern. There's a bit of a straight edge, but this is not connective tissue disease. The patient had anybody, and I'm going to say anybody when I give this talk to the audience, but if you can also think this through, this is the Hermansky-Pudlak syndrome. I know that sounded quite funny, didn't it? Now, if it is secondary, then you have asbestosis, familial genetic, connective tissue disease, those kind of causes. Then it's that condition associated UIP. But if there is no etiology, then it's a primary UIP, in which case it becomes idiopathic or idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. So the route that we trace to IPF is like this. Identify that it is an ILD, identify it as fibrosing, identify it as a UIP pattern. This is all radiology. Then clinically figure out whether it's primary or secondary, and if it is primary, then it's almost always IPF, which then implies that everything else is non-IPF. Now that would therefore mean that all secondary UIP by definition is non-IPF because it's not idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. And then you have the non-UIP fibrosing ILD. So here you have honeycombing, but apart from the honeycombing, there is ground glass, there's traction bronchiectasis, there's an axial distribution, there's upper lobe disease. This is a different pattern. This is non-UIP fibrosing ILD. And this is highly suggestive of a bronchiolocentric interstitial pneumonia pattern, and in this case was fibrotic hypersensitivity pneumonitis. Or here we have a patient with reticular opacity, so beautifully seen here, that lacy net-like appearance here, with traction bronchiectasis. But there's subpleural sparing, there's temporal and spatial homogeneity. This is highly suggestive of NSIP in a patient with scleroderma, which means this is not IPF. It is not UIP as well. So it's non-UIP, or this patient who has axial distribution of fibrosis, almost looks like progressive massive fibrosis, but in a patient who had sarcoidosis, the silicosis can look the same as well. This is obviously not a UIP pattern, and therefore it is not going to be IPF as well. So the non-UIP patterns are many. The newly described BIP pattern, the NSIP pattern, PPFE, which is pleuroparenchymal fibroelastosis, lymphoid interstitial pneumonia, diffuse alveolar damage in the later stages, and these conditions, HP, sarcoid, pneumoconiosis, connective tissue disease, all of which can present with a combination of these patterns. So a UIP pattern which has a cause, and a non-UIP pattern where it doesn't fit into those classic criteria of a UIP pattern. And I'll repeat that: reticular opacity, subpleural basal predominance, traction bronchiectasis with or without honeycombing, and nothing else. That's the UIP pattern, and you have to be very, very obsessive about sticking to the criteria. If it fits, it's UIP. If it doesn't, it's non-UIP. Even if it fits into UIP, it is IPF only when there is no other etiology. So all of these then become non-IPF. So that's the path that I've traced to making the diagnosis. And once the diagnosis is made, then you would go about managing it. And that's for the rest of the speakers who are to follow. Thank you so much for listening to me.